Hi, it's Barbara Bunsey. First, I want to let you know that we're coming to you from our backyard, so if you hear the birds singing, that's what's going on. We are in the middle of the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, and rather than doing our videotaping inside, we decided to move the operation outdoors. So I hope you enjoy listening to the birds sing. I was asked to design a piece showing something that I love to paint. It was kind of a hard decision at first because I love to paint a lot of different things, but one of my very favorite things to paint are pumpkins because of the sizes and the colors and the textures and all. And I found this really cute boo plaque that I thought it would look really cute on. I'm not much of a Halloween person, but I thought this was just too cute to pass up. So this pumpkin is painted on this really cute plaque. All right, let's move on and I'll show you how I did this painting. The background is painted with DecoArt Antique Gold Deep, which is one of my really favorite colors. And then the background, let me pick that up again, is stippled. If you can see, there's a little texture in that background. And we're going to get that effect by using a piece of crumpled plastic wrap. Whatever brand you have is fine. I will caution you, if you have your nails done, you might want to wear a glove because this will wreak havoc on your manicure. Okay, we're going to use then a sponge brush, and I like to do my washes and things in a paper plate. You can see this one's been used a few times. I'm big into recycling. Just dip my sponge brush into the water, and I'm going to squeeze some water out into my puddle of paint. You don't want to get it too thin because then it's not going to set up. It's just going to run all over the place. I hope I got that pretty good. If it's too thick, you can obviously always add a little water, which I think actually I'm going to do. If it's too thin, you can add a little bit more paint. So I've got that wash loaded in my brush. I'm just going to set this paper plate aside. I'm going to brush my wash onto my background. And again, I'm just using crumpled plastic wrap. And I'm just going to keep working this and keep recrumpling that plastic wrap. As it gets wet, it kind of loses its ability to give you a nice stipple, so keep turning it and twisting it so you get a dry part. And just keep playing until you get it to look like you want it to. While it's still wet, it's going to start running a little bit. So I keep working it until I get at least in this case anyway, a fairly tight stipple. Okay, I think you can see pretty well how I did that. And then you can just get rid of that plastic wrap and your glove. We're done with that now, and hopefully the rest won't wreck your manicure. Okay, I really do love the pumpkins that have some orange and green on them. I love the contrast of the color and the way the color streaks through them. We're going to start with the bottom sections here of the pumpkin, and I've used these brushes before. I've showed them to you. I'm going to use the Mezzaluna brush by Dynasty. They come in a variety of sizes. For the pumpkin, I'm going to start with the extra large. I'm using this brush dry. One of the reasons I like it so much is because it can come to a chisel edge, so to speak, and that helps me to get into some tight areas. Okay, so again, I'm using the brush dry. I'm loading it first into DecoArt Evergreen, And I kind of take the excess out. I don't take everything out because I do want to have some paint in here to be able to move around. I already got one side of the pumpkin done, but what we're going to do is come in here next to my pattern line, and I'm just scrubbing this color in. Went up a little bit higher on the left, maybe about a third to half of the way. And on this side, I'm going a little bit less. I'm moving toward my next pattern line, but not all the way over, because my background is going to act as my highlight in this case. And I have one other small section in here to do, so I'm just going to add this evergreen in here. And again, not quite all the way over to the edge. And with that color still on my brush, I'm picking up a little bit of midnight green. I'm working that in the brush. I'm going to add a little bit deeper shadows in here. Excuse me while I turn my piece. So this is the side that I already worked in with the evergreen. I'm going to add my midnight green in here, again in the shadow area. And I'm going to walk that out a little bit, but not as far as I did the evergreen. On the center section here, I moved my evergreen up about a quarter or a third of the way up already, and now I'm going to deepen that a little bit with my evergreen. So again, right down here at the bottom, you always start in the darker area where you want the shadows to be the darkest, and work. I take out a little bit of paint, work that color up into, but I don't want to cover up all of my evergreen, so I'm just going to take it up to about here. Now I'm going to, hopefully my other sections are dry. And again, a little bit of evergreen in here. I'm coming right next to my pattern line, pulling it out toward my highlight. And the same on these that I just finished. And if I want to clean that up, I'm going to take my shader brush, which I've wet. I'm just going to blot it gently on my paper towel. I'm going to pick up some of that evergreen in a corner of the brush and blend that out on my palette. And as we've said before, there's no magic number. You just keep blending until you see a nice gradation of color. And I'm going to come back over here to my piece, and especially on the left side where I want it to be a little darker, I'm just going to clean up my edges with a float of evergreen. And that's going to help to darken it. And again, just clean things up a little bit. And you can bring that a little bit across the center, and that just kind of blends everything nicely together. Okay, we're going to start working on the orange area. Just going to let that first brush soak a little bit. I'm going to go in with my large Mezzaluna brush. You have to bear with me. I'm not used to working outside and having my palette blow up into my surface. But, so we're turning around again because we're going to start adding our color to the outside edges of the pumpkin. Once again, I'm loading into, this time I'm loading into Spiced Pumpkin by DecoArt. And this time I'm starting on the outside edge of each section. And you see how nicely that chisel edge of this brush allows me to get into these tight areas. And you can take that close to your shadow line. And I want a little more orange on this side, so I'm streaking it down into my green area. So again, I'm coming in next to my pattern line, sneaking up on the chisel edge as I get to the top, pulling down into my green area and working that color in toward my pattern line. Paint's drying up out here a little bit. So again, working it toward my pattern line where my shadow's going to go. And I'm not worried about any of this background showing through because I actually did this step about 2 or 3 times. So that's going to help to cover up any areas, besides which, again, I love the look of the orange and green pumpkin. And that's just going to add some of that extra color in there. See how my brush is kind of skipping? I personally like that. Just gives another extra texture to the piece. And then on my center section, starting at the top and bringing that color down next to my pattern line. Let's grab a little more paint. It's really drying up quickly. And take it down into that green area. Want most of that orange color in your highlight area, but it's okay to go back and forth a little bit. It's not really going to hurt anything. Okay, let's come back over here. This side here I already did some, but I'm just going to add a little bit more color just so you can see. I said I did this step probably 2 or 3 times because this color did fade a little bit, and I wanted to cover up a little bit more of that background. You can see how pretty that looks then as it starts skipping, and you can pull that again down into the green a little bit, and especially if your brush is running out of paint, you can get those nice skips in here, which gives all that really pretty texture to your pumpkin. Okay, I'm going to let that sit for a bit. Just going to lay my brush down. I'm going to pick up my dirty brush and clean that out real well in my water. I'm blotting it really well on my paper towel, and then I'm rubbing it on my hand to get that extra moisture out. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time doing this for you just because I think you know what to do. And if this is a little wet, I'm not going to worry about it too much. And now I'm going to go into DecoArt Burnt Orange. And this color is going to be my shadow on the orange area. So I'm going to come in now the opposite side of my my pattern line. Excuse me. And pull that color in and work it out into my spiced pumpkin areas, just to give it a little more of an orange look up in here. I want to get rid of some of this green right in the very orange part of the pumpkin, and that's going to tone down that green a little bit. You might need to do this step more than once as well. You just kind of have to play with it and get the look you like. If you want a little more green in your pumpkin, certainly you can do that. If you want a little more orange in your pumpkin, you can add more of the orange colors to it. Okay, so I think you get the idea on that. I'm going to add some highlights now. I'm not going to do the whole pumpkin right now because I think you can see what needs to be done. But let me just show you on here that my brightest highlight is on the right, my darkest highlight or shadow was on the left. So my brightest highlight's going to come in on the right. You're just going to work it that way. Even though it comes down a little bit further down into the pumpkin on the left side, my brightest highlights are right in here. And we're going to work on some of those. I don't know that we're going to get the whole thing done just because, again, I think you know what to do once you see me do a little bit, and we don't need to waste our time on all of that. So I'm picking up my brush that had the spiced pumpkin in it. I'm going to pick up a little more spiced pumpkin in my brush. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit more color in here so we can work on building up these highlights a little bit. So just bear with me while I do that. I'm just going to scrub it in real quickly here. And we can pretend there's some shadows in here where the green is. We'll pretend that that has the burnt orange in it. But I just want to get, again, a little bit more deeper color in here so you'll be able to see the highlights better once we start working on those. So I said this right side is the brightest side, and I did do a pretty bright highlight right on that center one. And now when I'm working this, I should say, the second coat in, and then even if you're doing a third coat, you don't need to take it all the way down again. You can let these colors kind of blend then in, the oranges and the greens, so that gives it a real pretty effect too. Okay, so once again, I'm going to pick up a little more spiced pumpkin in my brush, and then I'm going to pick up some sand in that dirty brush, and I'm working this out on my palette. I want to work the colors together so I have one color in here, not just that sand screaming at me. And then I'm going to start again on the outside edges of each section here and start laying in my highlight. And once again, it's coming down, but not all the way down to where the orange ends. You see how pretty that's starting to come up. I'm coming back here to this puddle, which is drying up really fast. So we're going to work pretty fast here. And again, just add that in, and I'm working this toward my shadow area. Not totally covering it, but working it toward. I'm just going to come here and pick up a little more paint, working toward my shadow area. You can see, even though this paint is really getting dry quickly, if I keep coming back here to this same puddle, I'm still picking up a little extra paint. Here's my center section, and let's see if we can get a little bit on these areas here. We'll stop right there. All right, so I've not really picked up any extra paint except for what's in my puddle here, so I'm just going to rework that. I'm going to pick up now a little more sand in my brush. I'm going to rework that in that very same puddle. You want to keep mixing these colors in the same place. That's how you get the different changes of color, and yours may be brighter than mine or maybe not as bright as mine, but it's going to be your color, and you can adjust the color for yourself. And that's why I like doing it this way, because instead of mixing these colors, because it's easier for me to add a little more of the orange or maybe a little more of the sand in my brush and mix it on this puddle instead of just mixing up a whole bunch of puddles. Okay, so you can see how that's getting a little bit brighter. I'm not going to finish over here, but I'm going to come back and pick up a little more sand in my brush, coming back to my original puddle again, working it in. And I'm going to start. You can see how much brighter that is already. This step I did, I'm going to say probably 4 to 5 to maybe even 6 times, because I wanted to get especially those really bright areas pretty bright. But if you come in with just, here we go, if you come in with just the sand, and that's probably even a little too much sand right now, it just jumps out at you too much. That's why I like to blend those colors together a little bit. But again, when this color is skipping, it gives, I think, a little bit of extra texture to the pumpkin. So I think you get the idea there, and you can make this as bright as you want. Maybe pick up just a teeny bit more sand. I'm mixing that in my brush. Let's just add a little bit more highlight It's not showing up well enough. To that center section only, just so you can see the difference. There we go. You can see how pretty that looks then, and really brightens it up. Okay, I'm just going to put my brush down. I'm going to come back here to my, excuse me, my shader brush, and I'm going to put out the two purples I used. I used DecoArt Brilliant Purple, and I also used DecoArt Royal Purple in this design. Again, I like the contrast between the purple and the green and the orange. I love the way those colors work together. So again, I'm just wetting my brush, gently laying it down on my paper towel. I'm going to start out with the Brilliant Purple corner load, and I'm blending on my palette because I like to pull all the colors that I used in my design together. And you can see here on my sample that I added some of this Brilliant Purple up in here over my shadow areas and the mostly in the orange areas. So even though I don't have my, well, let's come here. Here's my burnt orange. So I'm just going to gently add this color. It's just a little awkward direction for me, but you can see what I'm doing here. And just kind of add that, and it just gives a little glow to the pumpkin too, and kind of pulls things together. Don't have that burnt orange in here, but we can add a little bit of purple here too. And I did that on every section. And then with the Royal Purple, again, I didn't even clean my brush, just a side load and a blend. And I did this color in the darker areas. So down in here, I'm going to get it a little darker. I'm kind of working in these V areas. You know what a V area is. Straight line to a point to another line. So I'm working my way into the point of the V, and then I'm walking it up. Same thing down in here. Again, I just think these colors really kind of act very reflective on the pumpkin. Okay, we're going to let that go. Again, I think you can figure out how to do it from here, and we're going to move up to the stem. I was switching to the medium Mezzaluna brush, and oh goodness, where's my other paint color? Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to play. Forgot to get that one out. So what I'm going to do, the color I did use was Pebble. I'm not going to get that exact color, but I'm using some espresso, and we'll mix that in with our sand, and we'll get a pale tan color, which hopefully will be somewhat like the Pebble. You always want to mix your darker color into your lighter color instead of the other way around, so you don't end up with a puddle that's the size of your palette. So maybe just a skitch more. Alright, so we've got a pale tan color going on here. I don't want too much paint on my brush, so I'm going to wipe the excess out on my dry paper towel. And again, this you're going to want to use Pebble by DecoArt. I kind of got it started here with the dry brush, and just added this in like the highlight areas of the stem. And then I'm picking up a little bit of extra sand on my brush, blending that together, and that's going to give me a couple extra highlights, which you don't want to put on the entire stem, just kind of here and there, and mostly in the center. Okay, now I'm just going to wipe my brush in my dry paper towel to get the excess paint out, because I want to use this brush again. I don't want to wash it out. I'm going to come back in here with my evergreen which I used before, and pick that up in my dirty brush. I'm coming here on my paper towel or my palette, and I keep picking up more and more evergreen and working that in. See, it's pretty light right now, but as I keep picking up paint, I'm going to get rid of that light color and get more of the evergreen color in my brush. And this is going to be my shadows in here. So I'm going to come in here. I already have my highlight in. I'm going to sneak my shadows at the bottom and up in between those highlight areas. And again, this is why I like the Mezzaluna brushes, because of the chisel edge, and that allows me to get up in between these narrow areas really well. It doesn't show up a whole lot because you're on the green background, but I'm going to come back then with my midnight green and add this in here too. Mostly at the bottom. You can see what a difference that makes. Then once that's dry, I'm just cleaning my brush out here. I do like these water containers with the ridges in them. As long as you pull your brush in one direction, you're not going to ruin it. Just don't go back and forth. That's when you ruin your bristles. Okay, hopefully my painting is dry by now. I'm going to corner load again into midnight. Evergreen. Keep going the wrong color. Blending that out. Coming over here to my stem. I'm going to add some floated shading here down at the bottom to set the stem into my pumpkin. And then when that's dry, I would side load into the midnight green and come back and add just a little more, not as much as I did with the evergreen, but a little bit more to deepen that shadow a little bit right here. Okay, so that's it for the pumpkin, and you can really play with this as much or little as you want. If you need to add more green, you can certainly do that. We're going to start working on the spooky spider, which I painted with midnight green, and I used just a 2 round to do the body and a liner brush to do the legs. And I took my midnight and side loaded and blended. I'm not going to be able to get a real good, again, you want to use Pebble to blend that together. And I did that on his back end. And then you can add a little bit of sand, even to your dirty brush. Re-blend that together. And that's going to go just to lighten him up a tiny bit more. And to do the legs, I used my liner brush, and you know when you're doing line work you need extra paint or extra water in your paint and brush. And then I picked up some of that Pebble and mixed that in. Again, my paint is drying up pretty fast here, but I just touched it. Here, let me just pick up a little bit of sand in my brush and you'll get the idea. But you always want to mix it with your base color, because again, you don't want it screaming at you. And I just touched the legs where I wanted to do my highlight. Oops, sorry about that. Put it down where I didn't want it. And this will help bring those legs a little forward too. I also did a little bit of, picked up a tiny little bit of my spiced pumpkin and blended it into my brush and added just a tiny bit of spiced pumpkin to his backside. Again, just to kind of pull the whole painting together. Then I went in with my number 2 round brush and the Brilliant Purple. painted his mask on. Now I'm just going to freehand this in here. You can put the pattern on. You kind of get the idea here. I did that with the 2 round, and then I used my liner brush and pulled just a couple of thin lines here, like the strap to hold the mask on. And if you're watching this during the pandemic or after or whatever, you certainly know we're wearing a lot of masks today. I'm going to let that dry for a little bit. I'm going to move over to the couple other sections here on the piece, the boo letters and the spider web. I'm going to just turn it over and show you on the back side what I did, because I don't have another surface available. This time I used a number 8 Dynasty dry blender. I like the number 8. It's very versatile. It works on smaller areas. It works on larger areas. So let's start with, well, we're going to make up our pretend pebble again. So that was some sand with and I'm mixing in my espresso. And I just dry brushed it onto my spider web. Doesn't have to cover 100%. Again, I think a little bit of a background showing through gives the piece a little bit of texture. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit. You want to cover that better, obviously, but I'm picking up some sand in my dirty brush and working that in. I'm going to just put that in a couple areas to act as a highlight. And then I'm just wiping my brush in a dry part of my paper towel. As for my boo letters, I use the Brilliant Purple. I'm going to pick that up, and again, I'm working that first color out by mixing it on my palette. And again, just a dry brush. I kept the brush closest to the raw edges of each letter, and I'm not going to do all of these. I'm just going to do a little bit here so you can see how I did this. And then I picked up a little bit of the royal purple in the dirty brush and worked that in. And the darker purple, pick up a teeny bit more. The darker purple went right next to those dark edges, and you can see it just helps to shade that a little bit. We'll come back and do some shading on the spider web in a bit. But let's come back over here to do the work on the mask. I side loaded into my Brilliant Purple and blended, and then picked up a tiny bit of sand and blended, and added this to the very top. Oh, it's a little too much sand. Let's blend that a little more and pick up a little more purple in my brush. This is again why I don't mix up puddles of paint. I rather, it's still a little bright, but you kind of see it there. It came down a little too far, so I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. And you can also use that color with your liner to help give a little bit more definition to the side edges here. It's really bright. And then you can pick up a little bit of the royal purple and add a shadow on the strap here next to the spider and next to the mask. And then I also use that color side loaded in my brush and shaded on the bottom of my mask a little bit. And then of course you want to let that dry a little bit. Then you're going to come back in with your liner and Midnight Green, and I just added a couple little, oops, a little too much water in that brush, couple little like ovals, I guess you could say, for eyes. And then with that color still in my brush, I'm picking up some sand and mixing it together. Be just a titch more. And I'm adding just a little highlight to each eye. Paint is pretty wet still, so it's not showing up. Here, let me show you on my sample so you can see it better. You can see I've got those little sand highlights in there. And the only other things I need to tell you is the line work that I did around the outside edge. Here I did with the Brilliant Purple. And again, working with a liner, you know, extra water in the paint and brush. You know that drill. Load your brush real well. Make sure you keep your finger down, anchor it down well, and then pull your line. I did add a little highlight on the line by picking up some sand in my dirty brush and working that into the brush to give myself a little highlight. And then where the corners are, and kind of in between the highlights, I added a little bit of royal purple. Okay, I told you I'd show you how I did the shading in here on the web. It's the same thing that I did here underneath the pumpkin. And that is done with a mix of approximately 1 part of burnt orange. So again, I'm just loading my brush into burnt orange and blending it out, to 3 parts of midnight green. So I'm picking up midnight green once and blending on the same area. I'm picking up midnight green twice, blending on the same area. I'm picking up midnight green 3 times and blending on the same area. I added this color underneath my pumpkin. And worked the color out. Now you want to keep it a little straighter than that, than I just did. But then I just kind of walk it down a little bit. And this is the same color. I'm going to reload again real quick into my orange. And I'm coming back to my same area here to blend. Don't want to waste any of that moisture or paint. 1 midnight green, 2 midnight greens, 3 midnight greens. And my spider web's not 100% done here, but this is the color that I then added on the outside edges here to shade my spider web. Again, I just wanted to use the colors that I've been using in my design. Okay, and then back to the pumpkin. I'm going to pick up just a bit more midnight green, coming back to my same area to blend, and I want more shadow here on the left side, so I'm just going to deepen this shadow a little bit here and work the color out. So it's a little bit darker on that left side because again my light was coming in from here, and this is where my shadow would be. Other than telling you now, and we've talked about these before, the DecoArt Glamour Dust Glitter Paints. I used a little bit of the Purple Princess on my purple lettering, and you can either dry brush or float that on, paint it on, whatever. It just really adds a little bit of glitz to it. And then for the spider web, I used DecoArt Silver Bling Glamour Dust Glitter Paint, and that's down here on my spider web. One other quick thing I forgot to mention is I did add a little bit of spiced pumpkin up here in my stem, and a little bit of my royal purple down here at the bottom of the stem, again just to pull all the colors from the piece together. I think that's it. I hope you enjoy painting this piece. I think it's a fun one. I'd be anxious to see what you do, so make sure you send me an email at bbunsey@calicogoose.com and attach a picture of your painted piece. Until next time, happy painting.